The red ships moved through space like death itself. They came in perfect lines, hundreds of them, their hulls gleaming crimson against the black void. For 300 years, these ships had brought the same message to every world they visited: surrender or die. Admiral Kethmore stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the stars ahead. His tall, thin body moved with the grace of someone who had never known defeat. His 6 arms worked at different control panels while his large eyes studied the data streams flowing across the screens. In all his years of conquest, he had seen the same pattern repeat itself countless times. First came fear. The new species would detect his fleet and panic. Their primitive sensors would count his ships, and their leaders would realize they faced something far beyond their power. Then came the desperate attempts at communication. They always wanted to talk, to negotiate, to find some way to avoid what was coming. Next was the brief, hopeless resistance. Every species tried to fight, at least for a little while. Their weapons would scratch the paint on his ship's shields if they were lucky. Their tactics were always the same: form lines, fire everything they had, and wait to die. Finally came surrender. Some took hours, some took days, but they all gave up in the end. The smart ones surrendered quickly and were allowed to keep their cities. The stubborn ones fought longer and lost everything. Kethmore had conquered 17 entire galaxies this way. His empire stretched across more space than any single mind could imagine. Trillions of beings lived under Zephyrian rule, all because his red ships had appeared in their skies one day. Today would be no different. His scouts had found another primitive species in a small solar system at the edge of explored space. They called themselves humans, and they lived on a blue-green world orbiting a yellow star. Their technology was basic, their military weak, their civilization young. The report said humans had only recently learned to travel between stars. They had a handful of colonies, a few exploration ships, and some mining operations scattered around their system. It would take maybe 6 hours to conquer them completely. Kethmore's communication officer turned toward him. "Admiral, we are receiving transmissions from the human vessels in this sector." "What do they say?" Kethmore asked, though he already knew the answer. "They always said the same things. They are asking who we are and what we want, sir. They seem curious." That was normal too. The young species were always curious at first. Meanwhile, Captain Jake Morrison sat in the command chair of the USS Defiance, staring at the readings on his screen. He was a man of average height with brown hair and steady blue eyes. His uniform was neat but not fancy, and his voice stayed calm even when he was worried. "Lisa, what are we looking at?" he asked his tactical officer. Lisa Martinez bent over, her console, her dark hair falling across her face as she worked. She had served with Morrison for 3 years, and he trusted her judgment completely. "Sir, I'm reading over 400 ships. They're big, maybe twice the size of our heavy cruisers, and they're all moving in perfect formation." "Any response to our communications?" Morrison asked. Amy Johnson, the communications officer, shook her head. "Nothing yet, Captain. They're definitely receiving our signals, but they're not responding." Danny Roberts, the chief engineer, looked up from his station. "Captain, I'm picking up some interesting energy readings from those ships. Their power signatures are unlike anything in our database." Morrison nodded slowly. The USS Defiance was an exploration vessel, not a warship. It carried scientific equipment, diplomatic supplies, and a small crew of 200 people. They had weapons, but nothing designed for serious combat. "Keep trying to reach them, Amy," Morrison said. "And Danny, I want you to analyze everything you can about those ships." The hours passed slowly. The alien fleet moved closer, but still no response came to human attempts at communication. Other human ships in the area began sending worried messages. The mining station at Beta 7 requested instructions. The research vessel Discovery asked if they should evacuate. Finally, a message came through. The voice was cold and mechanical, speaking perfect English through some kind of translation device. "Primitive species of the third planet, you will surrender immediately. Prepare your worlds for integration into the Zephyrian Empire. Any resistance will result in the destruction of your military assets and the bombardment of your population centers." Morrison felt his crew tense around him. This was not the first contact scenario they had trained for. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the United Earth Space Force vessel USS Defiance," he replied. "We represent the human race. We're willing to discuss peaceful relations, but we don't recognize your authority over our space or our worlds." There was a long pause before the alien voice returned. "You do not understand. This is not a negotiation. This is notification of your conquest. You have one of your time periods called hours to begin surrender procedures." Lisa Martinez looked at Morrison with raised eyebrows. Around the bridge, the crew exchanged glances. Morrison could see the question in their eyes. Morrison activated the ship-wide communication system. "All hands, this is the captain. We have made contact with an alien fleet that demands our immediate surrender. They claim to represent something called the Zephyrian Empire, and they say they have conquered other galaxies." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I want everyone to know that surrender is not an option we're considering at this time. We are humans, and we don't bow to threats. We're going to try diplomacy first, but I want all departments to prepare for the possibility of conflict." Back on the Zephyrian flagship, Admiral Kethmore listened to the human response with growing confusion. In 300 years of conquest, no species had ever simply refused to acknowledge his authority. They might beg, they might threaten, they might even attack. But they all understood that his empire was real and his power was absolute. These humans seemed to think they had a choice in the matter. Commander Veltar, one of Kethmore's most experienced officers, approached the admiral. "Sir, perhaps they simply don't understand the situation. Their technology is primitive. They may not grasp the size of our empire or the futility of resistance." Kethmore considered this. It was possible. Some species were slower to understand than others. "Send them historical data," he ordered. "Show them recordings of our previous conquests. Let them see what happens to species that resist the Empire." The data package was transmitted to the human ships. It contained footage of burning cities, destroyed fleets, and broken civilizations. It showed the red ships arriving at world after world, each time bringing the same message of surrender or destruction. Captain Morrison and his senior staff watched the recordings in silence. The images were horrifying, but they were also revealing. Lisa Martinez was the first to speak. "Captain, look at the tactics they're using. It's the same pattern every time. They rely on overwhelming numbers and superior technology, but their actual combat techniques are basic." Danny Roberts nodded. "And their ships, sir. They're powerful, but they're not designed for extended combat. They're designed to intimidate." Morrison studied the data more carefully. Every battle showed the same thing. Alien species trying to fight the Zephyrians using conventional tactics, lining up ship against ship, trading firepower until they were overwhelmed. "Amy, send a response," Morrison said finally. The message that went back to Admiral Kethmore was not what he expected to hear. "We've reviewed your historical data," Captain Morrison said. "We understand that you've conquered many worlds and many species. But you need to understand something about humans. We've never been very good at following other people's rules." Morrison paused, and when he spoke again, his voice carried a quiet determination that made even his own crew sit up straighter. "If you want our surrender, you're going to have to earn it." Admiral Kethmore stared at the communication screen for a long moment after the human message ended. In all his years of conquest, no species had ever told him he needed to earn their surrender. The very idea was strange to him. "Sir?" "Commander?" Veltar asked, waiting for orders. Kethmore turned away from the screen. These humans clearly needed a demonstration of power. Every species required a different approach to make them understand their situation. Some needed to see their military destroyed. Others needed to watch their cities burn. A few had to lose entire colonies before they accepted reality. "Commander, select a target that will show these humans the cost of defiance," Kethmore ordered. "Something important enough to matter, but small enough that they cannot defend it." Veltar studied the tactical display. The human presence in this system was small but spread out. There were mining stations, research outposts, and a few small colonies. One target stood out immediately: The mining station at coordinate 774. Admiral, it has about 3,000 humans working there and it appears to be important to their economy. Perfect, Kethmore said. Take a squadron and destroy it. Make sure the other human ships can see everything clearly. When they watch their people die, they will understand that resistance is pointless. Commander Veltar left the flagship with 12 ships, enough firepower to destroy a small moon. The mining station would be gone in minutes, and the humans would learn their first lesson about Zephyrian power. On the USS Defiance, Captain Morrison watched the enemy ships change course toward the mining facility. Danny Roberts had been tracking their movements and energy signatures since they arrived. Captain, 12 of their ships are heading toward Beta 7 mining station, Lisa Martinez reported. At their current speed, they'll reach it in 40 minutes. Morrison felt his stomach tighten. 3,000 people worked at that station, including families with children. They had no weapons, no shields, and no way to escape in time. Amy, get me Commander Harris at Beta 7, Morrison ordered. The face of Commander Bill Harris appeared on the screen. He was an older man with gray hair and worried eyes. Captain Morrison, we're tracking those alien ships heading our way. What are your orders? Bill, you need to evacuate immediately, Morrison said. Get everyone to the escape pods and scatter. Don't wait for anything. Harris nodded grimly. Understood, Captain. We'll start the evacuation now. Morrison turned to his crew. Lisa, I want firing solutions on those enemy ships. Danny, what can you tell me about their defenses? Danny Roberts had been studying the alien ships for hours, analyzing every piece of data his sensors could gather. Captain, their shields are incredibly strong, but they all operate on the same frequency. They're designed to stop direct attacks, but I think I might have found something. What kind of something? Morrison asked. Their shield generators create a field that extends about 50 meters beyond their hull, Danny explained. But the field has to allow their own weapons to fire through it. There's a split-second gap in the shield matrix every time they charge their weapons. Lisa Martinez looked up from her tactical display. Captain, if we time it right, we might be able to slip a torpedo through that gap. Morrison considered the odds. The USS Defiance was 1 ship against 12. Even if they could hurt the enemy, they would probably die in the attempt. But 3,000 innocent people were about to be murdered just to make a point. Set course for Beta 7, Morrison ordered. Maximum speed. The USS Defiance raced through space toward the mining station. Behind them, other human ships began receiving Morrison's tactical data and his plan. The cargo ship Frontier Spirit, commanded by Pete Wilson, changed course to join them. So did the research vessel Discovery under Dr. Helen Carter. Commander Veltar watched the human ships approaching on his display. He was puzzled by their behavior. Most species either ran away or tried to negotiate when they saw a superior force heading toward their civilians. These humans were flying straight into a fight they could not win. Sir, should we engage the human warships? His tactical officer asked. No, Veltar replied. Let them watch. When they see how easily we destroy their mining station, they will realize their weapons are useless against us. The Zephyrian ships reached Beta 7 first. The mining station was a large spinning wheel of metal and glass, home to thousands of workers and their families. Escape pods were launching from every docking bay, small lights fleeing into the darkness of space. Veltar ordered his ships into attack formation. Target the station's power core. 1 shot should be enough. But before the Zephyrian ships could fire, the USS Defiance appeared from behind a large asteroid. Lisa Martinez had calculated the approach perfectly, using the rocky debris to hide their attack run. Now, Danny, Morrison shouted. The human ship fired 3 torpedoes at the lead Zephyrian vessel. The enemy shields flared to life, easily stopping the first 2 weapons. But the 3rd torpedo was timed perfectly, slipping through the shield gap just as the alien ship charged its main weapon. The explosion sent the Zephyrian ship spinning out of control. Its shields collapsed and secondary explosions rippled along its hull. Commander Veltar stared in shock as his flagship limped away from the battle, badly damaged. How is that possible? He demanded. Their weapons are primitive. The other Zephyrian ships turned to engage the USS Defiance, but the human ship was already moving. Instead of trying to fight a direct battle, Morrison ordered his ship to weave through the asteroid field using the large rocks as cover. The cargo ship Frontier Spirit emerged from another direction, its industrial equipment converted into improvised weapons. Pete Wilson had loaded his cargo bays with mining explosives and turned his ship into a giant bomb. He rammed one of the smaller Zephyrian vessels, both ships disappearing in a brilliant flash. Dr. Helen Carter's research ship Discovery used its advanced sensors to jam Zephyrian communications and targeting systems. The enemy ships found themselves fighting blind, unable to coordinate their attacks or lock onto their targets. The battle raged for 2 hours among the asteroids. The Zephyrian ships had superior firepower and stronger shields, but they were designed for overwhelming weaker enemies, not for complex tactical combat. The humans used every trick they could think of, turning asteroids into weapons, using gravity to change direction, and coordinating attacks from multiple directions. Lisa Martinez proved to be a genius at finding weaknesses in enemy formations. She guided human ships through gaps in Zephyrian defenses and targeted damaged vessels that were trying to retreat. Danny Roberts kept finding new ways to penetrate enemy shields, sharing his discoveries with the other human ships. When the fighting finally ended, the results shocked everyone involved. The humans had lost the cargo ship Frontier Spirit and 2 smaller vessels, but they had destroyed 4 Zephyrian ships and damaged 6 others, including Commander Veltar's flagship. Most importantly, they had saved Beta 7 mining station. The 3,000 workers and their families watched from their escape pods as the surviving Zephyrian ships retreated. Commander Veltar could barely believe what had happened. His squadron had been defeated by a handful of primitive ships using tactics he had never seen before. The humans had not fought like any species in Zephyrian history. They had not formed lines or tried to match firepower. Instead, they had used cunning, creativity, and sacrifice. His report to Admiral Kethmore was difficult to send. Admiral, the demonstration has failed. The humans have unusual fighting methods. They do not follow standard tactical doctrine. Request instructions. Admiral Kethmore read the report 3 times before accepting that it was real. A species that had never fought Zephyrian forces had somehow defeated one of his best commanders. This had never happened before in 3 centuries of conquest. On the USS Defiance, Captain Morrison and his crew watched the enemy ships retreat. They had won their first battle, but everyone knew it was just the beginning. The aliens would return with more ships and different tactics. "Captain," Amy Johnson said quietly, "we're receiving messages from all over human space. Other ships are asking if they can join us." Morrison nodded slowly. Word was spreading that humans had fought the Zephyrians and won. Other captains wanted to be part of whatever came next. "Amy, send a message to Earth Command," Morrison said. "Tell them we need every ship they can spare, and tell them to prepare for war." Lisa Martinez looked at her tactical display, where the retreating Zephyrian ships were already regrouping. "Captain, do you think they'll come back?" Morrison watched the alien ships disappear into the distance. "They'll be back, Lisa, and next time they'll bring everything they have." But for the first time in 300 years, the Zephyrians had learned that conquest was not always easy. The humans had taught them that some species would fight back and fight smart. The galaxy was about to discover that the age of easy surrender was over. Admiral Kethmore stood before the massive display screen showing 200 red ships in perfect formation. This was more firepower than he had ever brought to conquer a single species. It was enough to destroy entire solar systems, enough to burn worlds to ash. He had never needed this much force before, but these humans had proven they were different. "Admiral, all ships report ready for battle," his aide announced. Kethmore nodded slowly. The defeat of Commander Veltar had been impossible to understand at first. How could primitive ships defeat superior technology? But after studying the battle recordings for days, he began to see the problem. The humans did not fight like civilized species. They used tricks, deception, and tactics that violated every rule of proper warfare. That would not happen again. This time he would bring so many ships that human cunning would not matter. No amount of clever tactics could overcome such overwhelming numbers. "Begin the advance," Kethmore ordered. and send the surrender demand one final time. 3 days earlier, Captain Morrison had sent an emergency message to every human ship and station in known space. The message was simple. The aliens are coming back with everything they have. Anyone who can fight, come to Beta 7. Anyone who cannot fight, run. Morrison had expected maybe a dozen ships to answer his call. Military vessels from the outer colonies, perhaps a few exploration ships like his own. What he got instead amazed him. 73 ships of every size and type appeared in the Beta 7 system over the next 2 days. There were cargo haulers, mining vessels, research ships, passenger transports, and even a few luxury yachts. Most of them had never been in a fight before, but their crews had heard about the battle and wanted to help. Pete Wilson arrived first, commanding a new cargo ship called the Iron Heart, after losing the Frontier Spirit in the previous battle. His cargo holds were filled with mining explosives and improvised weapons built from industrial equipment. Dr. Helen Carter came next in a larger research vessel called the Discovery II, equipped with advanced sensors and communication gear that could coordinate multiple ships at once. She had spent the last 3 days analyzing captured Zephyrian technology and developing new ways to fight the alien ships. Nicole Hayes piloted a small, fast mining ship called the Iron Eagle. She had been working in the asteroid belts for years and knew how to fly in dangerous conditions better than almost anyone. Her ship was tiny compared to the alien vessels, but it was quick and hard to hit. Captain Morrison looked at the mixed fleet gathering around the USS Defiance and wondered if they had any chance at all. Most of these ships were not designed for combat. Their crews were miners, scientists, traders, and explorers. They were brave, but bravery alone might not be enough against 200 alien warships. "Captain," Amy Johnson called from her station. "We're receiving the alien surrender. Demand." The same cold voice that had spoken before filled the bridge. "Human species, this is your final opportunity to surrender. You have seen a small portion of our power. Now you face the full might of a Zephyrian battle fleet. Surrender now, or watch your worlds burn." Morrison activated the fleet-wide communication system so all 73 human ships could hear his response. "This is Captain Jake Morrison speaking for the human fleet," he said clearly. "We've heard your demands, and we've seen your ships. We know you've conquered other species who were probably braver and stronger than us, but you made one mistake when you came to our space." Morrison paused, looking around at his crew, then continued. "You assumed we would fight like everyone else. You thought we would line up our ships and trade shots until the stronger side won. But humans don't fight fair, and we don't fight alone. Every ship in this fleet volunteered to be here. Every person chose to stand and fight instead of running away." His voice grew stronger. "You want to conquer us? Come and try, but remember this moment, because it's the last time you'll face humans who don't know how to kill your ships." The battle began 6 hours later, when the Zephyrian fleet moved into attack position. Admiral Kethmore had arranged his ships in the standard conquest formation, overwhelming firepower concentrated to break enemy resistance quickly. But the human fleet did not form up to meet them. Instead, the 73 ships scattered in all directions like startled birds. Some headed for the asteroid field, others moved toward the system's outer planets, and a few seemed to be running away entirely. "Sir," Kethmore's tactical officer reported, "the enemy fleet is breaking apart. Should we pursue?" Kethmore studied the display, confused. "Are they retreating?" His question was answered when the first wave of attacks hit his fleet from 6 different directions. The humans had not scattered randomly. They had split into coordinated groups, each with a specific mission. Nicole Hayes led the fast attack group, 12 small ships that darted between the larger Zephyrian vessels like angry wasps. They could not do much damage individually, but they distracted the enemy gunners and forced the big ships to waste ammunition on tiny, fast-moving targets. Dr. Helen Carter commanded the Electronics Warfare Group, using research ships and communication vessels to jam Zephyrian sensors and disrupt their coordination. The alien ships suddenly found themselves fighting blind, unable to track human movements or coordinate their own attacks. Pete Wilson led the heavy assault group, cargo ships and mining vessels loaded with explosives and improvised weapons. These ships were slow and clumsy, but they hit like hammers when they connected. 3 Zephyrian vessels were destroyed in the first 10 minutes when Wilson's group rammed them with ships full of mining charges. Captain Morrison kept the USS Defiance and the few actual military vessels as a mobile reserve, moving to support whichever group needed help. Lisa Martinez had become expert at finding weak points in enemy formations, and Danny Roberts could now penetrate Zephyrian shields almost at will. The battle raged for 18 hours across the entire solar system. The humans used every trick they could think of. They hid behind planets and moons, used gravity to slingshot their ships at impossible speeds, and even crashed damaged vessels into enemy ships rather than let them retreat. The Zephyrians had never faced anything like it. Their ships were designed to fight organized fleets using standard tactics. They were not prepared for enemies who appeared from nowhere, struck hard, and vanished before return fire could be aimed. Admiral Kethmore watched his fleet being torn apart by forces he could barely understand. Human ships seemed to be everywhere at once, coordinating attacks across vast distances, sharing information instantly, and adapting their tactics faster than his commanders could respond. "Sir, we have lost 47 ships," his aide reported, with shock in his voice. "The humans have lost 22. Kethmore could not believe the numbers. His fleet still outnumbered the humans, but the cost was already higher than any battle in Zephyrian history. How were primitive ships destroying his advanced warships? The answer came when he watched recordings of the human attacks. Every human ship was different, with different strengths and weaknesses. But instead of trying to fight like warships, they fought like what they were. Cargo ships became rams, mining vessels became bombers, research ships became command centers, and passenger transports became rescue vessels. More importantly, the humans were learning during the battle. Every failed attack taught them something new about Zephyrian defenses. Every successful strike was immediately shared with other ships. They were adapting faster than his forces could counter their new tactics. By the end of the first day, Admiral Kethmore faced a choice he had never confronted before. He could continue the battle and probably win, but at a cost that would cripple his fleet. Or he could retreat and admit that the mighty Zephyrian Empire had been fought to a standstill by 73 makeshift warships. The decision was made for him when Captain Morrison led a desperate attack on his flagship. The USS Defiance, supported by 6 other ships, broke through his protective screen and nearly destroyed his command vessel. Only emergency retreat saved Kethmore's life. "All ships, withdraw to safe distance," he ordered with shame burning in his chest. "Prepare to return to base." As the surviving Zephyrian ships limped away from the battle, the human fleet regrouped around Beta 7. They had lost 37 ships and thousands of brave people, but they had achieved something impossible. They had forced the Zephyrian Empire to retreat. Captain Morrison stood on the bridge of the USS Defiance, looking at the tactical display showing the enemy fleet in full retreat. Around him, his exhausted crew celebrated their victory. "Captain," Amy Johnson said quietly, "we're receiving messages from all over the galaxy. Other species are asking if what they heard is true. Did humans really defeat a Zephyrian battle fleet?" Morrison nodded slowly. Word would spread quickly now. Every enslaved species would hear that the mighty Zephyrians could be beaten. The galaxy was about to learn that the age of easy conquest was ending. But he also knew this was just the beginning. The Zephyrians would return with even more ships, and next time they would be ready for human tactics. The real war was about to begin. News of the human victory spread across the galaxy faster than anyone expected. On worlds that had been under Zephyrian rule for decades, people whispered in dark corners about the species that had made the red ships retreat. In hidden meeting places on conquered planets, resistance leaders shared stolen recordings of the battle at Beta 7. Captain Jake Morrison, now promoted to Admiral by Earth Command, found himself at the center of something much bigger than he had ever imagined. The USS Defiance had become the flagship of a growing fleet, but more importantly, it had become a symbol of hope for every enslaved species in the galaxy. The first alien contact came from the Altarian Republic, a civilization that had fallen to Zephyrian conquest 50 years earlier. Their secret message arrived on a coded frequency that Dr. Helen Carter's ships detected by accident. Human Admiral Morrison, the translated message began, "We are the Altarian Resistance. We have seen recordings of your battles with the Zephyrians. Our people have lived under their rule for 5 decades, but we have never stopped fighting. We wish to discuss cooperation against our common enemy." Morrison stared at the message for a long time. He had been thinking of this as a human fight, but suddenly he realized it was much bigger. The Zephyrians had conquered entire galaxies. There must be billions of enslaved beings who hated their rulers just as much as humans did. "Amy, send a reply," Morrison ordered. "Tell them we would be honored to meet with their representatives." The meeting took place in secret at a small asteroid base on the edge of human space. The Altarian delegation arrived in ships that looked like cargo vessels, but were actually disguised warships. Their leader was a tall, blue-skinned woman named Commander Zara, who spoke with quiet intensity. "Admiral Morrison, my people have studied your tactics against the Zephyrians," she said. "You fight in ways we never considered. We have always tried to match their strength with our own strength, but you use their strength against them." Morrison nodded. "We learned early that we couldn't fight them the way they expected, so we changed the rules." "That is exactly what we need," Zara replied. "The Zephyrians have ruled through fear and overwhelming force for so long that they have forgotten how to adapt. But your victories have shown us that they can be beaten." Within days of the Altarian meeting, other contacts began arriving. The Centauran Coalition, which had been the last major power to fall to Zephyrian expansion, sent a secret diplomatic mission. The Rigel corporate states, whose merchant fleets had been enslaved to serve the Empire, offered intelligence about Zephyrian supply lines. Even smaller species that had been conquered generations ago began sending messages of support. Dr. Helen Carter found herself coordinating with alien scientists who had been secretly developing new weapons and technologies. The captured Zephyrian ships from previous battles provided valuable intelligence, but the alien allies brought knowledge that was even more precious. They knew how the Zephyrian Empire really worked. "Admiral," Helen reported during a staff meeting, "our new allies have given us detailed information about Zephyrian military structure. They're not as strong as they appear. Most of their fleet is spread thin across hundreds of star systems, keeping conquered worlds under control." Chief Engineer Danny Roberts, now commanding his own technical division, had been working with alien engineers to combine human innovations with advanced alien technology. "Sir, we're making incredible progress. The Altarians have shield technology. That's almost as good as the Zephyrians. And the Centaurans have weapons that can punch through their armor." But Admiral Morrison knew that their growing alliance had not gone unnoticed. Intelligence reports indicated that the Zephyrian Empire was mobilizing forces on a scale never seen before. Emperor Zarthul himself had ordered the deployment of the Imperial Armada, the most powerful warships in the Empire reserved for threats to the government itself. Lisa Martinez, now commanding her own ship called the USS Resolve, had been leading deep raids into Zephyrian territory. Her attacks were coordinated with alien resistance movements, teaching them human tactics while gathering intelligence about enemy preparations. "Admiral, the Zephyrians are massing at least 1,000 ships at their main base," she reported during a secure communication. "These aren't the same vessels we've been fighting. They're bigger, newer, and they appear to have modified their shields based on our previous attacks." Morrison studied the intelligence reports with growing concern. The Imperial Armada represented the full military might of an empire that had conquered 17 galaxies. Even with their alien allies, the combined resistance fleet numbered only a few hundred ships. But numbers were not the only consideration. Nicole Hayes, now leading a squadron of fast attack ships, had been working with alien resistance fighters to organize coordinated strikes across multiple star systems. Her reports painted a picture of an empire that was beginning to crack under pressure. "Admiral, the Zephyrians are having to pull ships from garrison duty to reinforce their main fleet," Nicole reported. "Resistance movements are becoming active on dozens of worlds. The Empire is being forced to fight on multiple fronts for the first time in centuries." The preparation for the final battle took months. The human-led alliance worked frantically to build up their forces while the Zephyrian Empire gathered its strength. New ships were built using hybrid human-alien technology. Crews from different species trained together, learning each other's strengths and weaknesses. Commander Pete Wilson, now leading a wing of heavy assault ships, had been working with Altarian engineers to develop new ramming tactics. His vessels were designed to survive impact with enemy ships, allowing them to deliver devastating close-range attacks. "We've learned something important," Wilson reported to Morrison. "The Zephyrians have never faced an enemy that was willing to sacrifice ships to win battles. Their whole tactical doctrine assumes that everyone values their vessels as much as they do." Dr. Helen Carter's analysis of Zephyrian psychology had revealed something even more important. "Admiral, the Empire's strength comes from the belief that they are invincible. Every species they've conquered accepted defeat because they thought resistance was hopeless. But we've proven that the Zephyrians can be beaten, and that knowledge is spreading." The final confrontation began when long-range sensors detected the Imperial Armada moving toward the Alliance's main base. Emperor Zarthul had decided to end the rebellion with overwhelming force, committing nearly half of the Empire's total military strength to the battle. Admiral Morrison stood on the bridge of the USS Defiance, looking at the tactical display that showed the approaching enemy fleet. 1,000 Zephyrian warships, the largest military force ever assembled, was coming to destroy everything he and his allies had built. But the display also showed something the Zephyrians had not expected. The Alliance fleet had grown to over 400 ships, including vessels from dozens of different species. Human ships flew alongside Altarian cruisers, Centauran destroyers, and resistance fighters from 100 different worlds. "Admiral," Amy Johnson reported, "we're receiving a final surrender demand from the Zephyrian Emperor himself." The voice that filled the bridge was different from the cold tones they had heard before. This was the voice of absolute authority, speaking with the confidence of someone who had never known defeat. "Rebellious species, this is Emperor Zarthul of the Zephyrian Empire. You have caused enough trouble. You will surrender immediately, or I will personally oversee the destruction of every world that has supported this rebellion." Morrison looked around at his bridge crew, then at the display, showing hundreds of allied ships. He thought about all the species that had lived under Zephyrian rule, all the worlds that had been conquered, all the people who had been enslaved. "Amy, open a channel to the entire fleet," he ordered. When the connection was established, Morrison spoke not just to his own crew, but to every ship in the Alliance fleet. His words were translated into dozens of languages and broadcast to resistance movements across the galaxy. "This is Admiral Jake Morrison of the Human Fleet, speaking for the Galactic Liberation Alliance. Emperor Zarthul, you've ruled through fear and violence for centuries. You've conquered species that were alone and unprepared. But today you face something new." Morrison paused, looking at the tactical display showing the massive enemy fleet approaching. "Today, you face every species you've ever conquered, united and fighting together. You face beings who would rather die free than live as slaves. You face the combined courage of 1,000 worlds that have waited generations for this moment." His voice grew stronger, carrying across space to every ship in both fleets. "You wanted to teach the galaxy that resistance is futile. Instead, you've taught us that tyrants can be defeated when free people stand together. The age of easy conquest is over, Emperor. The galaxy remembers how to fight back." The Imperial Armada continued its approach, but for the first time in 3 centuries, the Zephyrian Empire faced an enemy that matched their determination with courage, their technology with innovation, and their unity with the combined strength of every species that refused to bow. The battle that would decide the fate of the galaxy was about to begin, and the outcome would determine whether freedom or tyranny would rule the stars. Admiral Morrison watched the enemy fleet approach and knew that whatever happened next, the galaxy would never be the same. The age of the Zephyrian Empire was ending and the age of galactic freedom was about to begin.